What's up, folks? I'm Private Hudson, and this is The Revolution. I don't know why they put a period in the title. Anyway, this game was on my Steam wishlist for a while, and I was able to pick it up recently for dirt cheap in a bundle. I was hoping that it would be similar to Papers, Please, except instead of detaining people at the border, you'd be executing people during the French Revolution instead. The Revolution ended up being not what I expected. It has an absurd amount of different gameplay elements that continuously get introduced over the course of the game. A lot of these are underdeveloped, and the worst one of them all, a turn-based combat system, takes priority during the game's final act and manages to ruin it. The Revolution took me around 14 hours to beat. About 3 to 4 of those last hours went into replaying the final act of the game because of the atrocious combat system. But before we get into that bit, let's just get introduced to the game in general. You play as Alexis Fidel, a drunk and a gambler who also happens to be a judge on the Revolutionary Tribunal. You're an unimportant character at the start. The first 2 trials give you the option of letting people go or putting them in prison. Then the guillotine gets introduced, and you get the additional option of execution. A little while later, Robespierre gets tired of putting people in jail, so the prison option gets removed, and you're left with guillotine or no guillotine. After a few trials, all of a sudden you're thrusted into the spotlight by presiding over the trial of Louis XVI. Afterward, other important figures of the French Republic start seeing you as a threat to their own power, so they try to get rid of you. What follows is an interesting story of political intrigue as you're forced to start growing your own power base and begin taking out your opponents. The main focus of the game are the trials, and at first glance, they appear to be the best part. You read through the case files, then link things to each other to unlock questions. It's pretty simple at first. The defendant killed someone with a knife at a goat farm, so link the knife to evidence and the goat farm to location. But then the game starts introducing traps and also limits the number of times you can be wrong. It also becomes a bit nonsensical. Let's say that person A stabbed person B. Alright, is this evidence? Wrong. Accusation? Wrong. Eyewitness? Correct. It kind of stops just making sense. If you run out of options, you can use influence points, which do reset daily, to get another chance to link things correctly, or you can just reload your save game and start the trial from the beginning, which is what I had to do a few times. After you unlock as many questions as you can, you begin questioning the defendant. If you take too long to reach a verdict, you might piss off the common people who will start rioting outside. Once you're done, you can choose your verdict. Your verdict will have an effect on the game's 3 factions, which are common folk, revolutionaries, and aristocrats. If your standing with either one of them gets too low, you'll be killed or imprisoned, and it'll be game over. You also must consider the opinion of the jury. And, okay, so when I first started playing The Revolution, I was going about it the completely wrong way. I was trying to be just and moral, and this got me into deep crap immediately. I had a bunch of debuffs for going against the jury and for angering one of the factions, and then I had another debuff which just occurs at random of people spreading rumors about me being an alcoholic. Every single day I'd lose reputation points, and I'd lose my standing with every single faction, and I'd lose influence points as well. And at that point I was thinking of, alright, let me just maybe I should just make a new game, but I decided not to, and I continued on this one, and I figured out how to actually play the game. So let's say I'm presented with a case where a woman is accused of stealing food from a merchant so that she could feed her 5 children. She's broke, she's got no job, she's got no money because there's a civil war going on. Now, my relationship with the common folk is very high, but it's low with the revolutionaries and with the aristocrats. If I let her live, those 2 factions will despise me even more. If I execute her, then my relationship with those 2 factions will improve. So, what do? Now here's the thing, when you ask questions, you don't have to ask all of them. That was my mistake. Most of the questions will have a picture of a dove being set free or a guillotine. That is the only thing that influences the opinion of the jury. So, simply ask the questions that have the guillotine next to them, execute the woman, take a small faction hit with the common folk, but gain some with the revolutionaries and aristocrats. There you go. It's a win-win situation. And that's ultimately the trials in a nutshell. Whether there was an actual crime committed, whether you find out the truth, whether the verdict was just or not, none of that matters. It's just a minigame of managing your reputation with factions. And aside from some trials that are important to the story, the rest are randomly pulled from the game's database. The characters don't matter, and whether they live or die doesn't matter either. And this goes for the story characters as well. They don't show up again if you let them live, and no one mentions them ever again. Even the game stops caring about these trials, as you come to a certain point where you end up reading a paragraph and just sentencing people in a row without even seeing them face to face. After the trial section, you usually spend time with your family. If your relationship with a family member is good, you'll gain bonuses to a faction or to your reputation. If it's bad, then the opposite will happen. There are a couple of options to choose from when it comes to spending time with them, but rarely is there one that everyone likes, so you'll end up pissing someone off anyway. Or you could just go gamble instead and piss off everyone equally. Then there's this part of the game where you manage your 3 agents on the map of Paris. This part is pretty bad. Only one of your agents is capable of fighting enemy agents, while the other 2 are mostly there to take over enemy territory or lower the unrest in yours. And even if you take over all the territory possible, you cannot take over your opponent's main base ever. So at the start of every single day, the enemy magically spawns in more agents that harass your territory, and then you have to go and capture it back. And you have to repeat this every single day. In your base, you have to construct a statue of the revolution. This occurs slowly and automatically over time, but you can speed up the process by capturing more territory. Once the statue is complete, you can build a few other buildings, and in these you can use influence points to purchase minor buffs like bribing the jury so that they won't have an opinion on the next case, meaning you can't piss them off. Except you don't know what the hell the next case is anyway, so whether you need this or not, you don't know. Or you can use your influence points to have one enemy agent on the map arrested. Except the enemy is just going to spawn more agents on the map the next day anyway. Overall, these are all useless. Also on the map is where you can access the intrigue section. Here's where you plot against your current political rival. Oftentimes you have decisions on what strategy to use. A lot of these display a 60% success rate, but they've worked 99% of the time for me. Sometimes you have to go by yourself and play another game of convincing where you choose an approach to take towards the other person's attitude on a subject. This is all trial and error, and you're best off getting a piece of paper and taking notes on what approach works for what attitude. That's what I did, because there's a bunch of these throughout the whole game. Oh yeah, there's also a little dice rolling minigame, which you get if you go gamble, and it's just poker basically. And then finally, there's the awful combat system that becomes the main focus of Act 3. During Act 3, you team up with Alexander Dumbass to protect Paris. Now I know it's pronounced Dumas, but the reason I'm calling him Dumbass is because you can either leave the battles up to him, which auto-simulate into a loss, or take control of them yourself and try to win. The enemy will spawn troops every single day, and you might get lucky and get a couple of troops for yourself. The battle system isn't explained very well, and the only tutorial for it occurs about 10 hours before you even reach this section of the game, so when you get to this part, you'll probably forget how it even works to begin with. And unfortunately, We the Revolution uses an autosave system. There's no manual saving here. So if you win 3 battles, but lose the last one, and these all occur on the same day, you might just have to reload that save and try all the battles again, and these battles are slow and take forever to get through. Since I didn't know what I was doing, I got wrecked. I was actually 1 day away from finishing the game, but there was no way that I could just win that last battle. so I had to reload the autosave all the way back to the start of the act and look at a Steam guide in order to get through this section. Basically, the only way to win is to pray to RNGesus that you get cannons. Then you put a medic on cannons, and then you spam the cannons, while you use your infantry as a wall. Now, what do you do if you don't get cannons? Reload your save and pray to RNGesus again. Once you've killed off the enemy's main cannons, focus on their ranged rifle units, and then finally kill off the infantry. Now, if you lose one piece of territory, things will spiral out of control because the enemy will attack all adjacent territories on their next turn. It's ridiculous. So what's my verdict for the Revolution? What sentence do I give it? Oh, it's bad. It's a collection of minigames where you juggle your standing with various factions. The story is really good, but it's difficult to talk about it without spoiling anything. However, the story falls apart in the third act. Actually, the whole game falls apart in the third act, and it becomes a combat-focused strategy game out of nowhere. If it wasn't for that, this game would be okay, maybe slightly above average at best. It would still have problems because it's a linear game with an illusion of choice. Ultimately, your trials don't matter. But what the developers did with the story and the gameplay in Act 3 was just inexcusable. Honestly, the most positive thing that I can say about the game is that it sent me down a Wikipedia rabbit hole, reading about the French Revolution, and this lasted till around 2 in the morning. At least I would hope we all know about Robespierre, but they don't really teach us here in America about this period and other people like David, Danton, Hebert, oui, oui. sorry about that. But yeah, except for the main character and his family, most of the other people you encounter are historical figures, which is definitely cool. Alright folks, that's the end of this video. If you've enjoyed it, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you folks next time.